Well, good morning. Thanks to all of you for joining us here this morning for a very special Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies event. Joining the SAIS Dean's Forum with the Strategic Studies Speaker Series to host a unique video teleconference with the President of Afghanistan, His Excellency Dr. Ashraf Ghani. On behalf of SAIS, I'd like to acknowledge the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan for helping put this event together. This is a significant undertaking. It's a great honor for SAIS to be able to host President Ghani here this morning for remarks on the corner of our Veterans Day celebration here in the United States. I'd also like to highlight that we're going to have a special guest joining us during the event this morning who's just arriving in from the airport. The Afghan current Minister of Finance, Dr. Mohammad Qayyumi. So we'll welcome him a bit later when he arrives. President Ghani's subject today is entitled Service, Selflessness, and Commitment. Those words could not be more appropriate given that here in the United States we're observing our Veterans Day holiday today in recognition of all American veterans of military service, past and present. I'm Dave Barno. I'm currently a visiting professor of strategic studies here at SAIS, 30-year U.S. military veteran, and have a bit of time in Afghanistan, which I'll mention as we go through this a little bit later on in my brief remarks here this morning. I'd start by saying that Veterans Day in 2018, though, is a particularly noteworthy event. Many of you have been following the news from Europe that highlight how significant this particular Veterans Day is. This past weekend, some 70 world leaders participated in a series of very special commemorations there in Europe. This November 11th, yesterday, marked the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, the war to end all wars as it was billed at the time, ending on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. And after over 4 years of war, one of the most bloody wars in humankind's history, the participants were exhausted. But they were also mindful of the immense sacrifices of the men and women who served in that conflict. At the time, the most cataclysmic war the world had ever seen. The 11th of November has been set aside ever since in many of those nations whose troops fought in World War I to remember the lessons of the Great War, but also to recognize the veterans of all conflicts. So we're here today in part to commemorate Veterans Day in the United States, which in this nation is a time to honor the men and women of all eras who have served our country in uniform, especially those that have served in a time of war. Many of you sitting in this auditorium this morning are veterans, and a number of you have served in Afghanistan. In my own family, myself and both of my sons have served there together, spending nearly 4 years in the Hindu Kush. So as we observe Veterans Day here in America today in recognition of November 11th, let's remember those that are still serving in America's longest war. They deserve our thanks, our respect, and our understanding. Most of all, they deserve to have a nation that knows and cares about what they are doing and remembers that this longest war for America is still being fought with Americans at deadly risk every single day. These men and women and their Afghan counterparts that they're fighting with deserve to be thought about more than just once or twice a year. Our American troops there are in Afghanistan because all of us sent them there, and we ought to make sure we understand why. Think about them on this Veterans Day holiday as we acknowledge the veterans of all of America's wars and thank all of them. We owe every one of our veterans a great debt of gratitude that cannot easily be repaid. Let me turn now to briefly highlighting our main event here this morning. I served as the overall U.S. and coalition commander in Afghanistan for just over 19 months, from 2003 to 2005, ultimately commanding over 21,000 U.S. and partner nation troops there. In that capacity, I interacted almost daily with senior Afghan government officials and got to know the then Minister of Finance, Dr. Ashraf Ghani, quite well. Minister Ghani at the time was a legendary figure among his colleagues and was well known by all of us in the international community in Kabul. We knew and we admired him for his relentless professionalism, his boundless knowledge, and his steely determination to put his nation on the right track. His efforts then and his efforts now as president mark him as a leader of remarkable courage and tenacity in the face of daunting obstacles to Afghanistan's enduring success. We're indeed fortunate to hear from him here today, speaking about service, selflessness, and commitment, virtues that echo strongly with our veterans and indeed all Americans. So at this time, let me turn over the podium to the Dean of the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, Dean Vali Nasser, who will formally introduce our keynote speaker. Dean Nasser.
Good morning. I'm Vali Nasser, the Dean of Johns Hopkins SAIS. Thank you, General Barno, for your comments, and especially on this important day, Veterans Day, and thank you for your service in Afghanistan and beyond. It is my pleasure to welcome you to a very special conversation with the Honorable Ashraf Ghani, President of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. He will be joining us shortly via video teleconference. President Ghani grew up in the Logar province of Afghanistan. After attending high school in Kabul, he began his academic career at the American University in Cairo, where he earned a BA in anthropology. He later earned his MA and PhD degrees from Columbia University, and we're very proud to say that he joined the faculty of anthropology department at Johns Hopkins University, where he was a professor. He then went on to work at the World Bank for over a decade on various projects around the world. And in 2001, he returned home as the special advisor to the United Nations Secretary General's envoy to Afghanistan. And in that capacity, he helped draft the roadmap for a new democratically elected government in Afghanistan. And when that vision became a reality, President Ghani was appointed as Minister of Finance under the then President Hamid Karzai. His passion for building a brighter future for Afghanistan won him the Sayyid Jamaluddin Afghani Medal, which is the highest civilian award in Afghanistan. In 2004, he stepped down from his post to become the Chancellor of Kabul University, where he founded the Institute for State Effectiveness. A world-renowned expert in the field of state reconstruction, he also co-authored the book Fixing Failing States in 2008. In 2014, President Ghani ran for and won election to the presidency of Afghanistan. And we're extremely grateful for his willingness to take time out of his remarkably busy schedule to speak with us this morning. I would like to welcome Mr. President Ghani to SAIS and Johns Hopkins University, and we very much look forward to hearing his views. Also with us this morning is a member of President Ghani's administration, Dr. Mohammad Humayun Qayyumi. He serves as the Minister of Finance and the Chief Advisor to the President in Infrastructure, Human Capital, and Technology. And before accepting his current position in 2015, Dr. Qayyumi served as president of California State University, East Bay. And our conversation will be moderated by retired Lieutenant General David Barno, a distinguished practitioner in residence at the School of International Service at American University, and he's also now a visiting professor at our Strategic Studies program here at SAIS. And he was the senior American commander of U.S. and coalition forces in Afghanistan from 2003 until 2005. We all at SAIS are looking very much forward to this conversation today on Veterans Day about Afghanistan, and I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. So yes, and I'm in particular honored to welcome President Ghani to our gathering today. Mr. President, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dean Wali Nasser, General Barno, Professor Qayyumi, members of the Hopkins community, of which I still consider myself a member, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be with you, fittingly on the Veterans Day. Let me thank General Barno for his distinguished service in Afghanistan, pay tribute to more than 1 million American men and women in uniform who served in Afghanistan, especially to the families of 2,415 men and women in uniform who paid the ultimate sacrifice to ensure our freedom and your security between 2001 and 2018. I would like to extend the special sympathy of the Afghan Army to the family of Major Taylor, his wife, Jenny Taylor, and his children, Megan, Lincoln, Aliyah, Jacob, Eleanor, Jonathan, and Caroline. He was murdered, and he was much beloved. Let me thank the U.S. government and Congress for their support in partnership, and the American people, especially the taxpayers, for their generous support. Thank you for this opportunity for a conversation. Thank you, Dr. Qayyumi, for your presence, dedication, and distinguished service and friendship. I will touch on about 9 key issues. First, whose voice am I reflecting? That of the Afghan citizens. Simply put, the Afghan citizens are making history. Let me offer some illustrations. On October 20th, more than 4 million Afghans came to vote. They were not risking a traffic accident, they were risking their lives. That is a dedication to democracy and to freedom. Confirming the true message of peace, 2,906 of our ulama gathered together, issued a fatwa that urged peace in June of 2018. Displaying patriotism. The Afghan security forces. American losses in Afghanistan between 2001 and 2014 were 2,357. And since 2015, still much regrettable, but the entire loss of American forces in Afghanistan is 58 Americans. In the same period, 28,529 of our security forces have lost their lives and have become martyrs for our freedom. Claiming equality. The youth of Afghanistan speak for themselves. The women of Afghanistan speak for themselves. All the strata, and particularly demand for balanced development in the form of spatial equality, is equally clear. Seeking markets, Afghan farmers, men and women, speak of market access and not charity. Demanding justice and an end to impunity. If people think that Afghans want an unequal system where some men dominate everything, they need to think twice. The largest demand is against irresponsible use of force and the demand for application of rule of law. There is not a reform process that has been undertaken that has not received wide public support, from reform of the entrance exam to the university that used to be a source of immense corruption and now one of the cleanest, to entrance exams for the civil service, for teachers and others. In all these areas, the voice of the public is clear. To understand, facilitate, and shape the national conversation, I engage with my fellow citizens, both in Kabul and the provinces, on a regular basis. Why? Because the Afghan society is a stakeholder society par excellence, and unless you have a face-to-face conversation in a society which is not marked by caste or major class inequalities, you need to look each other in the eye and have a conversation. So when I go to each of the provinces, I see between 1,000 and 3,000 people in groups, and then we have a large meeting to sum up. Since affirmation of democracy on October 20th, I've been to Kandahar, Helmand, Paktika, Daikundi, and Bamyan. I've repeatedly visited all 7 of our Army Corps commands and have spoken to men and women in uniform, non-commissioned officers, and others. In Kabul, I average meeting 4,000 people a month. Why? To understand whether there are emerging trends and where the public pulse is. Based on this, I would like to argue that a new Afghan, rooted in his traditions, but embracing the world and keen to claim a place for our country on the world stage, is emerging. I'm honored to voice the aspirations of my fellow citizens and to deliver on their demands for reform across the whole of the government in the state. What's the context in which we've been operating 4 years? The major characteristic of the context is uncertainty. Part of this is the global picture, because we are living in one of those moments that this 19th century figure put it, all that is solid seems to melt into thin air. Terrorism and changing nature of war, the fourth industrial revolution, rethinking of globalization in international institutions and organizations, and struggles over the definition of the 21st century, definition of Islam, and regional cooperation or general areas of uncertainty. In Afghanistan, we've had to, in addition, deal with simultaneous transitions in security, political, economic, and culture of the state and society. In terms of security, we had to fill the gap left by departure of 100,000 international troops, most of them US, by the end of 2014. Since January 1st, 2015, the Afghan security forces have had to assume that burden, and they were like 14-year-old, suddenly assuming the responsibilities of a 30-year-old. But the change has been significant, I'll return to. Politically, I'm the first person in the history of Afghanistan to have succeeded my predecessor on the basis of the will of the people, and then to ensure inclusion, form the government of national unity with Dr. Abdullah, my key interlocutor in the election. Economically, the departure of over 100,000 American troops and around 600,000 contractors who were driving demand brought a nosedive to the economy. We've restored it now to 3%. In culture of the state and society, the culture of the state was one of corruption. Corruption was the culture of the state. In society, because the new actors are coming to the fore, and society and the state are engaged in a meaningful conversation that is broad, encompassing, and, I hope, extremely productive. As foreign policy has been inherently linked to domestic policy, we have to focus on renewing trust and partnership with the United States, our foundational partner, NATO, as well as with NATO. With both of these partners, on the first day of our administration, we signed the Bilateral Security Agreement and the Status of Force Agreement that legally defines our relationship. And forged constructive relations in 4 other circles of our foreign policy: the region, Asia, Islamic world, and global institutions. Let me turn to the South Asia strategy that was enunciated by President Trump. The South Asia strategy has been a game changer, making every stakeholder rethink the premises and modalities of their engagement with the US and Afghanistan. The Afghan people had been waiting for 40 years for such a policy. By shifting from time-bound to condition-based approach, it has enabled us to focus on medium-term goals and take significant risks for peace. We interpret the condition-based approach as preparing the conditions for self-reliance through reforms, consolidation of democracy, and enhancement of reforms that would make the Constitution, particularly the chapter on rights and obligations of the citizen, a distinctive institutional reality and not just an aspiration. To give concrete shape to the condition-based approach, we've formed a compact with the United States that is over 600 indicators, and progress on it is measurable, and it is measured. Equally, we're focusing on 2024 goals of self-reliance. Simply put, how will we pay for the state by 2024? And the most significant bill is that of the security forces. Currently, it's $6.2 billion, bulk of which comes from assistance. August, September were spent on a very detailed examination of this, and we have concluded that we can save at least $2 billion by economizing and the other forms into 2 packages. $2.4 billion goes to counterterrorism, which is our commando force and our air force, and $2 billion for security. Minimally, we can meet the goal of $2 billion by 2024, but hope to meet the entire cost, because we must show our partners that we are partners and not just recipients. The South Asia strategy, very significantly, is presenting Pakistan with a choice. We hope that they will opt for the constructive option to see a stable Afghanistan as an asset rather than a challenge. We hold the hand of friendship in the prospects of cooperation, because key to the fight against terrorism, and particularly to the fight against poverty, and positively the empowerment of our citizens, is regional cooperation. Let me turn to the war. In 1998, 2 Chinese colonels wrote a book that General Barno is, I think, taught and commented on. They described the wars of the 21st century as being unrestricted. We, unfortunately, are today the site and the battleground of an unrestricted war. There is no area of our life that is not attacked. Mosques, schools, universities, hospitals, public squares, any public arena. This is not a war that is waged against armies, by armies, it is waged against the people. And it's equally attacking our culture, it's attacking our religious harmony, which is of unparalleled nature in the region. It is driven by transnational terrorist networks and transnational criminal organizations. Drugs are a very important component of it, and it's important that the nature of the drugs and how it moves and who benefits from gets to be analyzed and focused upon, because it is a driver. It is made possible by state tolerance or state sponsorship. Without that tolerance or sponsorship, the containment would have been of different order and the challenge differently. We would like to suggest to differentiate between the war in Afghanistan and the war over Afghanistan. The war in Afghanistan is the war with the Taliban. And we acknowledge that, and hence our effort on peace that we have turned to. The war over Afghanistan is over the definition of two platforms, a platform for regional cooperation that we in global security, or a platform or a launching pad for regional stability through both terror and criminal activity. We will suggest with humility that the performance of the Afghan national security and defense forces needs to be judged by their sacrifice of 28,529 martyrs in the capacity to fill the gap. There have been significant reforms while we've been fighting, but I'd like to salute the patriotism of the Afghan security forces, every single one of whom is a volunteer. We have no conscription, nobody is forced. And if there was not the patriotic impulse, I don't think that people would sacrifice their lives for a pay of $200. The fifth wave, this is a term I coined. We're facing the fifth wave of global terrorism, beginning with anarchism. And we would, again, humbly suggest that America's fight is against this wave rather than in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a site, it is not the driver of the war. Intensification of the war after the adoption of the South Asia strategy was predicted by us, and unfortunately, our prediction has come true. We hope that our other prediction, that this intensification will be followed by intensification of the peace process, will be borne out. As we speak, in the last week, another round of intense conflict is imposed on us, and we feel that this is another response to the failed effort to subvert the election. Everything possible was thrown to subvert the election, but the Afghan people defied them. Hence this wave, but we will, like previous waves, contain them. Peace. We are seeking peace from a stance of national consensus. I was greeted on Friday by a 6-year-old girl in Daikundi who's so self-confident that walked through the stands while I was shaking hand, holding my hand, and what she sang was that the children of Afghanistan want peace because they would like to grow in a secure Afghanistan. This is the demand and request of every Afghan. We've owned and led the peace process, but the opportunity for this peace process was created by the South Asia strategy. There should be clarity that the Afghan government is both the political will and the courage to undertake the difficult challenge of peace, and we demonstrated this by offering peace to Taliban without conditions. We equally offer peace to Pakistan to put an end to the undeclared state of hostilities between our two countries. Should peace not prevail, my other prediction that the two societies would go to a state of mutual distrust and increasing cultural and social hostility resembling France and Germany of 1870-1914 is likely to happen. The assassination of General Razik in Kandahar is brought an intense level of distrust, and the tension is so thick that you can cut it with a knife. A society, when it verges on a consensus on defining an opponent, then becomes a difficult society to guide through peace process. But the space is open, and we need to open the space. Reframing the narrative and options. Initially, post 9/11, was one set of possibilities and hope for quick reforms that unfortunately Afghans who were in charge did not avail themselves of. But we are availing ourselves of the opportunity. And in this regard, what we have done with the region bears remarks. 4 years ago, Afghanistan was not part of any calculation in Central Asia or the Caucasus. Today, we're very proud that all of our Central Asian neighbors are looking south and we are looking north. We have been engaging the region in a concept that Toynbee first coined for us, namely an Asian a roundabout where ideas, people, and goods flow and interact with each other is what is becoming a reality. Thanks again to Dr. Qayyumi. When the government was formed, Afghanistan was 9 separate islands of electricity. And in another 18 months, it will become one national grid. And this is the beginning of a set of massive, we hope, transformations of energy from Central Asia to South Asia. And TAPI and other projects are moving forward. Ceasefire, the June ceasefire was a testing of assumptions. The ulama of Afghanistan demanded it. I declared it within 4 days, and it was reciprocated. It was implemented with 98% success. 1% was minor variation, and 1% was relatively serious because it took place in places where the conflict had been very recent. The coming of over 30,000 Taliban fighters to the Afghan cities went without a single incident. Nobody lynched them. Nobody attacked them. What does this show? The society is a willingness to move forward and not be stuck in the past. Certain societies, in very difficult moments of transition, need a degree of historical amnesia. Over focus on the past could cost us the future, but moving forward is extremely important. And the other assumption that the Taliban fighters will never accept was again proven wrong. Those are the ones who openly declared that they were tired of fighting. And most critically, once done once, all the justifications are gone. The fight today is no religious grounding. Not only the fatwa of the Afghan ulama, followed by the fatwa of the ulama in Indonesia, followed by the gathering of YC ulama, and the declaration of the guardian of the 2 holy mosques and the imams of Mecca and Medina are a testament to this. The Islamic level of agreement is being prepared. Elections. Afghanistan's central problem since 1747, where we've had continuity and Ahmad Shah Durrani formed the government, has been the problem of succession. Almost every time, with a couple of minor exceptions, succession was contested. The Constitution of 2014 provides the framework for solving a problem that not only Afghanistan, but historically all Muslim states and empires have not been able to solve. Succession now takes place through the will of the people. Circulation of the elite takes place through the will of the public. Because of this, the parliamentary elections are an extremely important marker of coming together. First, I would like to salute the people again, because there couldn't be a stronger affirmation than turning out against every possible threat, where voting pools, election officials, people had been systematically attacked for months, where open declarations had been made to tell them not to participate. People participated. Second, 2,500 candidates participated. The debate was vigorous and quite significant. The results have to be announced, but very significant generational change took place. A lot of young people came and engaged in the political process, which is extremely important. Our security forces displayed remarkable valor and discipline. Valor in the sense that for 6 weeks, systematically they created the conditions, and on that day, they delivered the enabling conditions. Our Air Force, within 96 hours, delivered essential and non-essential material to every place where ground conditions, road conditions will not allow it. And the technology, which a lot of international experts had told us was non-applicable to Afghanistan, in written reports, $1 billion had been spent on elections through the UNDP agency in Afghanistan. There wasn't a voter list or any other set of enabling conditions. But the technology that we spent our own money on has been received with remarkable welcome, to the extent that now members of the Complaints Commission that have gone through the provinces have come back saying that the people only trust, even if they themselves are candidates, the results of the electronic voting. It's a simple, clearly managed system, and it's important. However, these successes were marred by the managerial failures of the Independent Election Commission, and now the focus is that the process of preliminary announcement and final results of the election will be made credible. The votes need to be honored, and because the Election Commission is independent, the government in general, and I in particular, have refrained, and we have made clear that any interference by government officials will be sanctioned. And we have asked the Complaints Commissions that if there are any complaints against these officials and they are documented, I've made it crystal clear that they will be either punished according to the law, because interference is a crime, or they will be dismissed. And we are totally committed to that. Equally, let me be clear that we are totally committed to holding the presidential elections in the spring. We're choosing the exact words of the Constitution, and we want to make sure that the people of Afghanistan are the ultimate judges, because the next government has to finish the unfinished chapter of our history that began in 1919, and they must have a mandate and clarity of that. Reforms. Let me just highlight some issues. First, one is not used to seeing Afghanistan emerge as the top performer in any indice. But a couple of weeks ago, the Doing Business indicators of the World Bank ranked Afghanistan as the top performer among 10 performers in reform in the business environment. There's a generational change. 49% of the Afghan cabinet is under 40. And this is taking place across both central and provincial government. Women's participation is increased very significantly, and we are determined to further increase it. Both the youth and women of Afghanistan, as well as the other strata, but particularly these two, I'm very proud to say, can speak for themselves. They don't need interpreters. They're networked, they're connected, and they're dedicated. Creating the legal basis of a functioning state and a dynamic economy has been probably our most significant legacy. Close to 400 pieces of legislation have been passed. Just to give you some illustration, the criminal code was totally revised. Bankruptcy law that had not been revised since 1932 was revised. Municipal law that had not been revised since 1920s. This, I think, parallels the type of efforts that were taken by countries like Korea and when China embarked, but particularly Korea, Hong Kong, and China, and a number of other places. Subnational reform has been critical objective. Afghanistan in the past has been either experiencing the wrong kind of centralization, where everything is stuck at the center, or the wrong kind of decentralization, where you go towards strongman rule at the locality without rights and obligation. We have 5 levels of governance. The village has truly been empowered. The National Solidarity Program that I had the honor of initiating when I was finance minister is now being replaced by a citizen charter, and this program, unlike national solidarity, is encompassing both urban and rural areas. Municipal reform has been very significant. Our mayors were selected through a very competitive process, and I read at least 120 submissions to learn and interact with them, or really marking. Our key weakness is in the area of district governance, and our focus now is to ensure that district governance comes from the shadow of war, and civilian leadership at the district level comes. And the last issue is definition of provincial rights and obligations to make sure that we can move forward. Anti-corruption is a thread that ties everything together. I've personally chaired over 166 sessions of the National Procurement Council, because about 18% of the GDP is in procurement, and the state is the most significant actor. We are proud, Mr. Oteki leads this effort, that we are moving towards electronic procurement, and now centralizing procurement so the speed can be achieved. The Center for Justice is indicted 3-star generals, deputy ministers, and others, and people are serving in prisons. But changing the culture of corruption to a culture of accountability is our most significant challenge. This is what I hope the generational and gender change and redefinition of authorities. Our approach is to redefine the rules of the game. Fundamentally, corruption was driven by informal rules prevailing over formal rules. Weak accountability, fragmented institutions were a result of this, and particularly our security forces were haunted. Anti-corruption effort in the army, I think, has really gone far, and, for instance, claims of ghost soldiers would be practically non-existent. They could not be verified. In police, we still have a way to go. But the most significant change that has happened in this area has been our rule of law approach. The Supreme Court, which had a reputation for mismanagement or corruption, now today is considered one of the cleanest institutions, and I'm honored that I nominated 3 judges that have been approved, and I've nominated the other 3 judges. The Attorney General office, again, changed from being accused or described in public as a source of driving corruption to one that drives reforms. Institutionally, anti-corruption is critical to us not because just the international community is in agreement that anti-corruption is fundamental. Our people demand anti-corruption. And again, let's understand the cost of corruption is borne by the poorest citizens. And empowering the citizens to be selected, to be provided with services, etc., is a key to creating trust. Regional connectivity has been another major focus. Afghanistan had only 1 railway terminal in 2014. Now we have 2 more with Turkmenistan, one in the province of Faryab and the other in Herat, and we're working both on transmission lines. Last week, a private sector memorandum was signed where several thousand megawatts of power will be transferred directly from Turkmenistan via Afghanistan to Pakistan. Railway, Dr. Qayyumi is leading an effort for railway from province of Balkh to province of Herat that could significantly change regional connectivity. In TAPI and other TUTAP and other projects in CASA are all underway. But that's the beginning. We hope our trade with Central Asia is every year increased by leaps and bounds, and we hope. The air corridor that we launched with India, with $800,000 of state support, our exports increased very substantially. Recently in Mumbai, a memorandum of understanding for over $200 million. A couple of weeks ago, we launched the first Pinat corridor to China, and now, through Turkish Airlines, we've been able to reach Europe, and Saudi Arabia and Emirates are part of the series of air corridors. The land corridors, however, are the transformative element. Lapis lazuli to Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and equally, the opening of Uzbekistan has been transformational. Cost of connectivity to China has been halved. The speed brought from 3 months to 1 week. Afghanistan is fast taking advantage of the close to 3 billion market, India, China, the region, and moving on. Let me conclude with politics as a vocation. My Johns Hopkins period, my Columbian Johns Hopkins period, were particularly marked by Max Weber's essay on politics as a vocation, and John Dewey's essay on citizenship, where he argued that the public is formed through a conversation. We faced impossible odds, seemingly impossible odds. We still face very difficult choices and conditions. But human agency, the Afghan seeking dignity based on an immensely rich historical heritage of thousands of years, a sense of egalitarianism, and a place earned by sacrifice, national unity, where the slogan that I run with, that no Afghan is superior to another Afghan or inferior to another Afghan, that is literally a paraphrasing of the Constitution. Global partnerships in regional partnerships are our way out of this. We can, must, and will overcome the recent past. Next year, 2019, are going to be marked by two anniversaries. The 40th year of Soviet invasion that plunged us into immense suffering, loss of millions, refuge of tens of millions, and destruction of all our infrastructure and assets, but also the 100th-year anniversary of our independence, that when we declared independence in 1919, we were one of the very few countries then in the Muslim world and in Asia that was stable and with a vision. The unfinished chapter of 1919 both beckons us and haunts us. It beckons us because it argues that we must finish and close the vicious circle. It haunts us because if the dream is not fulfilled, it would become a nightmare. We are keen to reclaim our civilizational heritage, and let me argue that despite all the problems, this is a fundamentally moderate society. There are extremist groups and individuals, but the society is a fundamentally consensus-seeking and moderate society. And to own our future. Thank you for the opportunity for conversation. I'm delighted to be with you virtually, and let me thank again the Hopkins community for years of friendship and an environment that truly was unique. As you know, John Dewey graduated from there, and the seminar was invented there. I've learned the meaning of community through my colleagues, and have learned enormous amount, and particularly when I had the pleasure and honor of teaching some of the best students in working with colleagues. Let me also thank Mr. Josh Brickman and Mr. Fazil Haq Akmal for making this event happen, and Mr. Hoteki and Dr. Qayyumi for being with you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, President Ghani. It's terrific to see you once again. I've got the honor of moderating some questions that have been posed by our students, and then after perhaps addressing a few of those, we'll open up the discussion for questions from the audience, which also includes the media. So here's a few thoughts framed by some of our students here at SAIS. Number one, given the recent security incidents across Afghanistan, how would you, Mr. President, describe the overall security situation in the country as a whole?
Would you like me to take the questions one by one?
That would be terrific, sir, if you can do that. And I think I've got 2 or 3 or so here from the students, and then we'll identify people in the audience to ask questions in about 5 or 10 minutes.
Sure. The question of security is the following dimension. Is the state at risk of collapse? No. Why? Because as long as we have our commando forces and our air force, we will be able to retake. Is Are the losses horrific? Yes. Most of the losses occur in defensive positions because deployment was static, and we are rethinking this. What is driving it? What is driving it is that now, I will humbly submit, the South Asia strategy is under attack. We feel that all the conditions for a breakthrough are available to move forward, but positioning to make sure that peace does not take place from strength, but from perceived weakness. If we experienced this before, yes. We first experienced it in 2006 when we came from Brussels conference. All 6 of our army corps were attacked, and we were able to overcome it. Second, 6 weeks prior to the election, we saw some of the worst fighting, and we overcame. At that time, the media predicted the fall of up to 5 provinces. None of that happened. Bottom line, again, the nature of the war is not between armies. If it were that, it would be a different war. What makes this war horrible is that civilians and social institutions, communities are attacked. And there, we need the global voice and regional voice to emphatically come and say this is unacceptable. This type of war is no result that is protective, and its most dangerous thing is that it could break the consensus that is forged through years of effort regarding seeking peace.
Mr. President, a related question on cooperation between the coalition, the United States, its security forces, and those of Afghanistan. As we look at that long-standing now, almost 18-year security cooperation effort, where would you say it is the strongest today, and where would you see that cooperation needs change or needs some improvements?
Well, first of all, General Barno, I would like to thank you as a former commander of ISAF and say thank you to all your predecessors and successors, and to say what a terrific privilege it's been for me to work with General Campbell, General Nicholson, and now General Miller. Unlike the period that I think you commanded, Afghan government and the United States see totally eye to eye. Illustration. One of the most significant reforms was implementation of the inherent law, where hundreds of generals were retired with benefits. There's a total renewal of the leadership. The Afghan army that now exists, I think you would probably not recognize. It has come to its own. Second, there's a clear division of labor. We are doing the fighting and the dying, as it is our obligation. The support is precise, it is well thought through, and it's demand-driven. I think one could not ask for better partners. Where we are focused now is to make sure systems and processes are built on the one hand, and leadership and management takes place, but equally, as I brought to you, by 2024, Afghanistan has to assume the major burden for paying for its security forces. This is a very constructive dialogue. I welcome it, and I think the environment of trust is very high. What happens, and that's why I singled out Major Taylor, green on blue is an area of attack, and when that happens, of course, it is very hard. In 2018, American casualties have been 9. Again, 9 too many. But we are totally focused to ensure that the penetration doesn't take place. Strengthening is we have agreed on a 4-year reform program that the first year of which has been implemented. Implementing that is resulted in doubling of our commando force, tripling of our air force. As long as we continue on this course, I think we'll be fine.
Thanks, Mr. President. I think as you're keenly aware, I know Americans today, when they think about Afghanistan, and even our most recently installed commander there, General Miller, has spoken about this, that the future in Afghanistan is not going to be, in the security sense, a military solution, but is going to have to come from some sort of negotiated settlement with the Taliban. Can you talk to us a little bit about your assessment on how serious the Taliban is about pursuing peace talks with the Afghan and the U.S. governments, and what you think the prospects of reaching some sort of negotiated settlement today are?
Well, first of all wars have to end politically. There are very few wars, particularly the wars of the 21st century, that are going to end militarily. A divided society is not a harmonious society and cannot vision and move forward with ease. Because of this, as I stated, we've taken the ownership of the peace process. The Kabul process is bearing results. In past 17 years, an event like the ceasefire of June in Eid al-Fitr had not taken place. I feel that it's now not a condition, not a question of if, but when. The international level, there's total agreement between U.S. government and the Afghan government to move the peace process forward, and U.S. engagement is to ensure that talks with Taliban result not in negotiations with Taliban, but with direct talks between the Afghan government and Taliban. The Islamic dimension is equally very strong. We have challenges remaining in the regional dimension. And that's the key promise of SAS, the South Asia strategy, to be able to persuade particularly the significant actor where sanctuary and logistic support and ideological support is provided Taliban openly, Pakistan, into an engagement. But the most important area of interaction has to be inter-Afghan and then become broadened. I'm committed to this to make it happen because it's a demand of the society. The price of peace needs to be determined. We are a stakeholder society, and once the price becomes clear, we have to renew our consensus. So we must have a mechanism of endorsement nationally that brings us sustainable peace. The quest of the Afghan people is for enduring peace. For enduring peace, we are committed to make the necessary sacrifices. The process, however, must be a very open process. Peace cannot happen at midnight behind closed doors. It has to have a form, and I'm forming an advisory council to make sure, inclusive Afghan-wide, so we can consult on key issues rapidly, and I am hopeful.
Mr. President, at the beginning of our introductory remarks today, we noted that we're hosting this talk on the commemoration of Veterans Day here in the United States. In the last decade and a half or more, thousands of American and many tens of thousands of Afghan soldiers have lost their lives in the effort to protect the security of Afghanistan. Your forces and the Afghan National Security Force have taken particularly high losses, which continue to mount in recent months. How do you think this continued stress on the Afghan security forces, the numbers of casualties they're taking, will affect your ability to contain the settlement and bound their abilities and their offensive until some sort of settlement can be reached?
Thank you again. First, I pay tribute as I did in my opening remarks, to American and NATO troops. According to our numbers, between 2001 and 2014, 2,357 American troops, 453 UK troops, and 676 NATO troops paid the ultimate sacrifice. We salute that sacrifice. The total number is 3,486. But that number has been reduced very significantly, as I brought to your attention. The total number of US, UK, and NATO troops that have lost their lives since 2015 is 71. Still too many. But the point is that previously, Americans and NATO forces were fighting for us and dying. We have assumed, because of this, I think we can say proudly that we are now partners, not dependents. Our casualties from 2005, where the war really started, 2014 were 507,004 martyrs. Our casualties since 2000 is 28,529. It is a major sacrifice, but it's a tribute to the Afghan forces that the army is not run away from a single place. They may have withdrawn and re-engaged. Also, our commando forces have not lost a battle. The key issue is, again, to emphasize the urgent need for a political approach where regional support for this level of violence inflicted on a people ceases. That we've opened the political process. The United States has emphasized the political process because they were thinking there are obstacles. When I spoke at the ceasefire and declared the ceasefire, Secretary Pompeo welcomed it and supported it. We are able to move to the offensive position, and that's the key. One of the most important things is to consolidate the bases, because they were planned during days when the Afghan army didn't have much to do. A lot of our losses are in static positions, and some of that are from failures of wearing protective gear and others. Those aspects will be addressed systematically. But again, it bears the word must protest against this type of violence inflicted upon a country where for 39 continuous years is bearing the burden. We need a respite. We need a breakthrough from this vicious circle. We are not a battleground of proxy wars. We are a people who offer a very distinctive vision for being the platform for cooperation, both globally and regionally.
Mr. President, one last question before we open it up to the audience, which includes some media. What message would you give to Pakistan in terms of what your expectations are for how they can help support a reconciliation and a negotiated solution to this long-running conflict?
We put our relationship with Pakistan under three categories. First, support for violence has not benefited Afghanistan or Pakistan. This specter needs to be removed, and the way of removing it is support for direct discussions between the Afghan government and Taliban. Second, the undeclared war between Afghanistan and Pakistan must end. We have not supported any movement against Pakistan from Afghanistan. The Afghan soil has not been used. We've exercised immense restraint in control because we seek a cooperative relationship. Second, we need to define what is a normal relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and we can offer a lot in the way of cooperation. We are the key to Central Asia. How will Pakistan get to Central Asia without a stable Afghanistan? All the work on energy and others, the connectivity is to a bridge, a connector, a roundabout, is to make sure that is connecting people. So connecting Central Asia and the Caucasus to South Asia involves. The third is we need to together agree with the United States and the rest of the international community on counterterrorism. These three sets of relationship are key. From the day that President Trump announced the South Asia strategy, I extended the hand of friendship. We've engaged in several rounds. On paper, APAPS, the document that we've arrived at, is a really good document. What is our expectation is to translate those commitments into reality and help us reduce the level of violence and move forward to a lasting and just peace.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. We're going to open it up now to questions from the audience here. For those of you in the audience who'd like to ask a question, I'll recognize you. I'm not sure if we have mics or not, but if need be, I will repeat your question so that it can be heard on the microphone. Please identify yourself and your affiliation, and please phrase your comments in the form of a question with a question mark at the end. All right, in the front first. Front right, yes. Well, let's bring a microphone up if we could.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is Aaron Mohabit. I'm a student at American University. And my question to you, President Ashraf Ghani, is if the Taliban believes that they are in a winning position in this war, then how can the Afghan government reach a peace deal that is in favor of the nation? Thank you.
The Taliban are not in a winning position. Let them disclose their casualties. Let them answer to the mothers who've lost their children. Let them answer to the wounded, and let them answer to communities that because of their interference are been deprived of education, of health, of services. Where is the positive model of the strength? If they've been able to transform a single village in a positive direction, if they change the condition of 10,000, 1,000 youth to change them into agents of a constructive Afghanistan, the perception of strength is false. This war is supported, enabled by dependence. Their choice. Are they willing to accept the Afghan community as they were accepted during the ceasefire? Or will they reject a social compact? Afghanistan's social makeup is a source of richness, and the ceasefire showed that they're welcome. We will not engage in a peace from position of weakness. And again, the sacrifice of our soldiers, non-commissioned officers, all ranks of our security forces shows that the will is there, but my key submission is that the bloodletting is unnecessary. On the negotiating table, we can arrive at a just and lasting peace that is inclusive and allows us to overcome the past.
Next question here in the white.
Thank you very much. My name is Nazira Azim Karimi, Khabarnigar Azad. I'm an independent Afghan journalist. I would like to ask my question and داری جناب رئیس جمهور افغانستان بسیار زیاد تشکر از اینکه با وجود مصروفیت‌های زیاد در حضور ما قرار گرفتین. سوال من این است که امنیت روز به روز وخیمتر شده میره یکی و جریان روند صلح به رهبری دکتر زلمه خلیلزاد نماینده خاص وزارت امور خارجه ایالات متحده آمریکا آغاز شد یک ماه قبل. خوبم پیش رفته. نیویورک تایمز مقاله را نشر کرد و از قول شما ذکر کرد که مسائل بسیار عمده و حاد در مورد افغانستان مذاکره با سران طالبان با شما در میان گذاشتن نمیشه. آیا این دقیق است؟ و همچنان طالبان گفتند که با مقامات امریکا در مورد خروج جدول زمانی خروج قوایشان مشوره کردند. آیا امریکا این مسئله را با شما در میان گذاشته؟ تشکر.
تشکر. دکتر خلیلزاد ما دوستای 53 سال هستیم. دیروز هم جلسه داشتیم، امروز هم جلسه داشتیم. دکتر خلیلزاد هم امرای یک گروپ بسیار برجسته زنای افغان و هم اعضای شورای صلح درست پیش مجلس تفصیلی داشتن و در تمام از این مورد وضاحت دادن که نقش از اینا نقش تسهیل کننده است. نقش از اینا نقش رهبری کننده نیست. رهبری پروسه صلح، مالکیت پروسه صلح در دست حکومت افغانستان است. ماشین پروپاگاند طالبان منبع حقیقت نیست. وضاحت کامل داشته باشین و دکتر صاحب خلیلزاد هم میره با وضاحت گفتن که گروه افغانایی که مسئولیت دارن و نسل نو افغانه که امروز در صحنه به صورت اساسی ظاهر شده از خود نمایندگی کردن میتونه و طرح از ابتدا از ما بود، پیشنهاد از ما بوده و اجماع ملی را که در بخش با وجود آمده نتیجه بحث‌های سرتاسری افغانا بود.
For the advantage of everyone else, we'll ask Dean Nasser to translate that for us, the synopsis.
Just translate a very quick synopsis. The question was whether the United States representative in the peace process is adequately consulting the Afghan government on the process. And the president's answer was that many of the ideas and the plans have actually come from the Afghan government, and there's ongoing consultation and discussion as the reconciliation plan goes forward.
Thank you. All right, let's see. Yes, ma'am, right here.
Hi, I'm Becky Van Doren, used to be with the State Department. I'm interested in asking Mr. President what your views of the new Pakistan government are and what your hopes are for working out the differences and issues you have with them with this new government.
Yes, thank you. We've not yet seen the sense of urgency, and we hope that sense of urgency can be brought to the picture. We have a framework, which is the Afghanistan-Pakistan agreement. The key is to move from talking to taking action. As I repeat, our framework, our national interest is to keep engaging with Pakistan, and we seek a stable Pakistan. But we need to see substantive and measurable change. As of yet, that substantive and measurable change with the government of Prime Minister Imran Khan has not been seen. But this is what needs to take place, and I think the South Asia strategy, we're grateful to the United States and other partners that they are keenly seeking this engagement, and the constructive option that is on the table is the option that we seek and is in the interest of Pakistan in the region.
This man right here, in red.
Elaine Sereo, Associate Rector of UACU WIUU in Kiev, Ukraine. President Ghani, thank you very much for addressing us today. Regarding Afghan's development goals for societal stability, as the former chancellor of Kabul University, and now the leader of the Afghan nation, how would you envision the, quote, as you said, demand for balanced development to be leveraged by higher education institutions in Afghanistan in context with Afghanistan's development goals? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the best job I had was that at Kabul University. I'm very proud to be performing this job, but that's the one I really love. Dr. Qayyumi could provide you a lot more, but I'll just say, first, what is really heartwarming is the way Afghan society, elders, in particular, women, are endorsing or embracing education now. In Helmand and in Paktika, two provinces that General Barno knows very well. I was there recently, and in each one, there was a remarkable set of statements from the elders, whom I met separately from youth and others, as I said, groups. And they were saying the key area of investment that needs to take place is education. The president of Paktika University got up and said, because it's just begun, it's one of the youngest universities. He says, look at Khost. In 17 years, the investment in Khost University, which is called the Sheikh Zayed University, because Abu Dhabi very generously helped us, transformed Khost into a real center of dynamism. This is across the board, whether it's been Kapisa or Badghis or other provinces. What Dr. Qayyumi has been made a critical contribution in is now we have created a platform for learning from MIT with hundreds of universities, including MIT. But the most significant change likely is to make the curriculum and the support resources from the Indian Institutes of Technology and Indian Institute of Business for about 2 million Afghans. We have to fundamentally change from a book-focused and a teacher-focused education to a student-focused education. The younger generation is really ready for this. Again, in the universities, we implemented the program of retirement that is brought a new leadership. I was in Bamyan University. When I was in Kabul University, the absolute majority of the teachers had BA's degrees from the same university. In Bamyan University, 8 PhDs, around 63 masters, another 8 for PhD, and another 60. Only 13, the two master's figures, I'm citing from memory, so at BA degrees. We are witnessing a fundamental change, and particularly now we're focused on the primary and secondary. Our other track that, again, Dr. Qayyumi is leading is vocational and technical dual track. Finland, one of the most advanced countries, is at 21% unemployment a couple of years back. Switzerland at 2.5%. The difference, the dual track educational system, where vocational education is being retaught, and there's a brilliant Afghan woman, Nadima Sar, that is directing this independent agency. So it's really about human capital, because our natural capital, thank God, is immense, though threatened because of environmental change. Human capital is really the future, and we're very keen. And our cooperation, again, needs to be online. Technical assistance delivered the old way is not required. Illustration, the plan for Kabul that had been seeking for over 15 years, we were able to prepare with a firm from Boston called Sasaki a brilliant firm, and everything was done online. Now it's a 6-volume framework that enables us, hopefully, to really transform COP. So ways of cooperation, definition of education, and particularly knowing the fourth industrial revolution, that the definition of work and employment is going to fundamentally change, needs to be really taken. And I have colleagues like Dr. Qayyumi and Mr. Hoteki that are in the forefront of this, and very proud to defer to Dr. Qayyumi and for further comments.
We have room for one more question before I ask Dean Nasser to come up and express our gratitude once again to President Ashraf Ghani. I would also note that we're going to have the opportunity, once the President departs, to hear from Minister of Finance Qayyumi as well, who's here in the audience briefly. So I'd ask you to remain in your seats to listen to his remarks here. Sir, right here in the golden tie. Let's grab a microphone if we could so we can hear that in Kabul. It's 8,000 miles.
William Zarvin from Conflict Management at SAIS. First of all, President Ghani, let me congratulate you on your recent induction into the Hopkins Society of Scholars, the university's highest honor. My question remains about the negotiations with the Taliban. Since eventually the United States troops will be gone or highly diminished and the Taliban will be part of the government, what are we negotiating for? That is, what concessions can we expect to get from the Taliban? And what are we negotiating with? That is, what kind of pressure can we put on them?
Thank you, Professor Zartman. It's great to see you. I've always benefited from your views in writing and also the various conferences that we've been together. It was a privilege to be inducted into the Society of Fellows. I greatly value it. Unfortunately, I couldn't come in person. Our ambassador, who's now our national security advisor, presented me. You have peace as a process and not as an event, precisely to understand how to reach agreement. The answer to your question is premature, because we need to sit together to define. So our approach is, and we have done this in Mari, this is not the first round, there was a round that began in Mari, but then when the news of Mullah Omar's passing away leaked, it brought an end to that process. The team that will start their key task at first will be to provide a table of content and a list of issues. Each side is critical issues, and then there are common issues. For instance, return of refugees is a common issue. I've reviewed over 100 peace agreements of the 1990s, and they fall into very distinctive categories. One of the most significant will be, how do you incorporate the fighters? How do you transform a military movement into a political party, etc.? Those parts are standard, but there are distinctive questions in those critical questions from both of our sides. From us, it's going to be, what assurance are we going to have that the deal that is stuck is not going to be replaced by another state-sponsored group? So commitments must be both between two parties and commitments regionally. Taliban will have questions to the United States and to us. That the key is that there is no question that is off the table. The process of negotiation will bring about depth, breadth, and nuance to the issues. And as I brought P4 to you, this is where we go back. When we are confronted with key questions, we need to consult a range of stakeholders, and hence the advisory group and the Peace Council as mechanisms of that. So we need to go with an open mind and in the process understand what unites us, what divides us, how do we overcome the divisions and ensure that a process. Equally, it's very important to differentiate between peace and security. Latin American and Central American agreements of the 1990s that endured actually brought peace but not security. There was an increase in insecurity, but was criminalization. So it's important to see that the public support translates to peace. Nepal, again, was a case where peace did not immediately result in security. We have to make sure, and from the perspective of the new generation of Afghans, the new Afghans, and particularly from the perspective of the Afghan women, ensuring the gains of the last 17 years in the chapter of the Constitution on rights and obligation is going to be a very, very central issue. As well as if the Constitution needs to be amended, it can only be amended through the constitutionally defined process. So we are prepared to tackle all the issues, and we hope we can reach closure. Thank you again for your question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dean Nasser.
Thank you, Mr. President, for a very rich conversation, for joining us today and sharing with us your vision. I would like to you to know that we are all wishing for your success, and you can count our good wishes as well as all of the support that we can give at this very critical juncture for Afghanistan. Please join me in thanking President Ashraf Ghani.
Nasser, I would like to say thank you to you and to all the participants in today's discussion, and again to thank the Hopkins community for years of friendship and engagement.
Thank you.
Tashakkur. Thank you.
We're also privileged today to have with us the Finance Minister of Afghanistan, Dr. Qayyumi, who has very graciously agreed to address some of the critical issues that the President raised during his comments today, and he will also entertain some questions from the audience after his remarks. Dr. Qayyumi, please.
Thank you, Dean Nasser, and good morning, and thanks again for this opportunity. First of all, I also would like to say a very happy Veterans Day, and also a tribute to all of the fallen heroes in Afghanistan who fought with Afghan soldiers for the case of freedom and fighting against global terrorism. Well, the President primarily addressed the political issues. I would like to talk a little bit about on the economic issues and what has really happened in the past 4 years. Of course, when we talk about peace, peace is not, it's not just the absence of violence, but basically how you can really build a society that can function well, that can really be the leader of its own future and economically survive and be able to thrive and move forward. In 2014, President Ghani had put a document called, basically the Manifesto for Change, and it was, the sense was a decade of transformation, a decade of moving to self-reliance from the support that Afghanistan has received very generously from the U.S. and many other NATO partners. And as part of that, in that document, he had taken elements in a very taking elements back to the very basics in terms of how we can really transform an economy that had become so much based on support from the donors. And just to give you an idea, in 2014, about the imports of the country was 21 times bigger than the exports. And we talk about a population of over 30 million. When you have an export of less than $500 million, how could you really, make an economy work? So basically, all what had happened And a lot had happened despite a large amount of funds from the US and other Western partners that had come to Afghanistan. The economy that had been built was, in my view, a very pseudo-economy, an economy that was not built on, it was a consumptive economy rather than a productive economy. So the whole basis was taking everything back to the basics and what are the major changes that needs to happen. And the major change, and we went back to the basics, and the basics were, well, what can we really grow in the country? What can we extract from the land? What can we really manufacture? What can we really trade? And also, how can we really get into new technology? So that was basically the approach that we started. The first element there was seeing how we can really build the infrastructures so we can really move forward in all of these areas. Just to give you an idea, in 2001, only 6% of the population had access to electricity, and even today it's about 37%. So, electricity being as one of those infrastructure of infrastructures, how could you really move a country without these basic elements? So we started developing an integrated infrastructure plan that included the movement of goods for railroads, roads, as well as on the air corridors, especially being a landlocked country. A landlocked country is always dependent on all of its neighbors. And then to look at movement of energy, given the fact that Central Asia is so energy rich. And when we look at South Asia, that's so energy poor. Just to give you one statistic on the electricity side, South Asia being 1/4 of the world population, it only has 1/20 of the generation installation of the world, average generation capacity of the world. So even if you increase their energy capacity by 5 times, you just bring it close to the world average. So we saw quite a bit of that movement, as President Ghani talked about. Similarly, in terms of the data, if you look at half of the world internet service is from Europe to Asia, especially East Asia. And it, because of the route that it has currently through the oceans, it takes about a data packet about 130 milliseconds to go from Europe to Asia, while if it is terrestrial lines, will cut that one by about 30 to 40 milliseconds, and every millisecond is worth about $100 million. So, so these were some of the kind of key elements that we were really looking at. Some of the key elements that we started back in 2014-15 was changing the rules and some of the laws of the country. For the first time, we had private sector could invest in electrical generation, transmission, and distribution system. Similarly, on the data, we broke the government's monopoly as the only entity that could bring all of the fiber optics and installations and owning of it, that now any company, if it's foreign or domestic, that can do. And also the idea was, what are the ways that we can bring private sector investment to the country? Because no country has moved from poverty to prosperity through grant and aid. In fact, if you look at it, for every $15 to $20 of grant and aid, that has a similar impact as $1 of private sector investment. So that's why this, our whole shift was how we can really move towards private sector investment. So along that line, the next key element was how we can really begin to look at the human capital or the human capacity that is needed to be able to move in these directions. Although since 2002, the number of universities and the number of schools has really changed tremendously. I mean, back in 2001, during the Taliban period, we only had about 700 students going to school, and all men. But today, that number has increased to over 7 million, both boys and girls. And the number of universities has moved from 2 to 3 to over 29 public universities and about 130 private universities. But unfortunately, in the area of quality, not a lot had really changed. I mean, the quality of universities had really remained quite low. So what we needed to do on the human capital side was finding ways that to see how we can really connect the needs of the country to the capabilities and the programs that we have in the university. So the first element was looking at the curriculum from the K-12 and also looking at vocational technical. That's a very big need of the country, and then moving to the higher education side. One thing that we did for the curriculum, we went back to the 21st century key survival skills on how we can make sure that the students know how to read and write, how they can think critically, how they understand their civic responsibility and have a global perspective, have the basic elements of ethics, and also look at technological fluency, because we saw those ones as the key elements, and that's how we really began changing the curriculum for the K-12. Also for vocational technical, we realized that that's going to be the major key element in moving the society forward. We created that to be a separate separate authority by itself. Now we have created one vocational, we use the Germanic vocational technical model to be a far more successful one than the Anglo-Saxon model. And we've been working with the German specifically with the GIZ. We have now created one vocational technical school in every province. In 2 years, there are 34 provinces. In 2 years, we'll have one in every district. There are about 340 districts. And in about 5 years, our plan is to convert 70% of our K-12 high school, general education high school to vocational technical, because most, even in many societies, not more than 30% of the students end up going into a 4-year college education. With college education, we have been working on changing the curriculum and also trying to bring new modes of teaching, specifically bring more blended education. We've been working with Afghanistan is one of the few countries that have been working with MIT edX to be able to be part of their open edX as well as full edX. In fact, later this week, I'm going to be speaking in Boston and at the MIT conference along this line. And again, the idea is not to have online education as a replacement of face-to-face, but in a blended model, specifically, I think, for the third world countries where the number of faculty are relatively short. If you have some good faculty, if their material is put online all across the country, the faculty in the local universities can use that one as a basis, and we can move from passive lectures to a more active learning environment for the students. And that basically has been the area on the higher education side. I'm glad to say that on the vocational technical, this year we had over 63% of our vocational technical applications were women. So this is something, and we see this to be a very critical and very effective way of really getting women into, in terms of their empowerment, in terms of education, in terms of really becoming more part of the productive economy. On the regional transformation, that has been one of the other roles that I play in, specifically working with Central Asian countries. We were able to develop very comprehensive set of agreements with Central Asian countries, specifically with Uzbekistan, with Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan, as well as the other two countries that do not have direct borders with us, primarily in Kazakhstan and some with Kyrgyzstan. And as part of it, we have created a number of key transit routes through China, from Afghanistan to Kazakhstan, all the way to Russia, as well as through what we call a Lapis Lazuli corridor that takes through Turkmenistan, Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, and to Europe. And I think all of these ones, with the railroad master plan that had been put together, really creates new elements of connectivity between Afghanistan and the rest of the world, as well as connecting Central Asia to warm waters down to via Pakistan through Gwadar port, as well as via Iran to the Charbahar port. So I think these are some of the key elements and key aspects that we have done. I'll just mention a few of the other major procurement, some of the other major reforms that we have done. Procurement has been one of those areas that we've made it quite an open and very a very far better system than actually I could say compared to the region as a whole. The process has become quite transparent, and also it has been noticed by a number of different entities overall. Also, in terms of budget, this year we had, I've been a Minister of Finance only for 3 months. We had the budget hearings. It took us 3 weeks. Every day from 8 to 5, I had with every department of the government come and talk about their budgets in a very open way. We had the civil society, we had other entities also there, so everybody can hear what they have and also what agreements we can reach. And my hope is that by the end of it, I just actually, yesterday before getting on the plane, I presented the budget to the Senate in Kabul, and hopefully in a couple of weeks, if we can get it through the Senate, then it will go through the Parliament, the lower house, and my hope is that the budget will be published on the network and everybody can see, and hopefully we can also put the next step would be to all of the expenses of the country. I think that in itself to me is something that the more the budget and expenses are seen by every citizen, that in itself, that light is the best disinfectant. I really believe in that. That would really be an element that will remove, that will help on the reform and reduce and bringing more transparency. So as part of what, one of the works that we're doing, I'll give you one example of this. This is basically, and as I refer to that one, to the document that President Ghani had put together back in 2014 as part of his the decade of transformation and what we need to do. We went to that document and pulled 200 statements on things he wanted to be done. And as part of that, we found that of the 200 statements, 78 of them has been accomplished. 90 of them we have partially accomplished. 22 are in planning in process. 2 has not been accomplished. And 8 elements we could not find some information. So basically, out of that 200 statements are over, we have seen 39% fully accomplished, 45% partially, and the other 20% in progress, and about 1% not achieved. So, are there challenges in Afghanistan? Absolutely, there are tremendous challenges. But I think compared to where the country was, where it has been, I'll just, in terms of, as I mentioned in 2014, the imports were 21% of the exports. Today it's 7 times. 7 times is 7 times too many. It should be the other way around, that Afghanistan should have a plan on where it can be a major exporting country rather than import. And the plans that we put together for the next 5 years, which we will present it in Geneva as part of a discussion that we have in Geneva on the 28th. The country can reach self-reliance by 2025, given the security condition to be one of the key factors. And if that happens, basically in terms of the tremendous aid that Afghanistan has received, that can really draw down to what aid that other countries are receiving. So the plan that had started back in 2014 has really been working, and by 2024 we hope that we can reach that level of self-reliance. One of the factors on one of those budgets that the President referred to on the security budget, right now it's about 6.2 billion. The Afghan government is putting 440 million of it. This coming year it's going to move to 538. The 2020 it's going to be 1.1 billion and 1 million. By 2024 it's going to move to 4.4 billion. And with the changes that we're trying to make on that, as well as trying to make some of the major elements of procurement central, I think we can make a serious achievement. This year is going to be the first year that we'll be able to reduce we're going to be reducing the government size. We're going to be reducing several ministries and cut several ministries. We're going to, all of these ones will be ways that we can control the government's operational budget. And my comments bashingly to every one of my colleagues in the cabinet has been, if every organization cannot cut its operational budget by 10% a year, they're a failure. because you should be able to find 10% every year in terms of how we can reduce losses, how we can use technology, and how we can improve efficiency. So that basically is the program that we've really started. I think I want to be conscious of time, and so there will be some time for the questions that you have. So again, I thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for this, to be able to address after President Ghani, and I'll open it up for some questions that you may have.
So we'll take a few questions before we wrap up, and I'll moderate that right here with the blue tie.
I'm Wahid Faizi from Voice of America, the Afghan service. I would like to ask Mr. Minister in Dari or Pashto. آقای وزیر شما یک شخصی نزدیک به رئیس جمهور هستین، اگرچه ما میخواستم که از رئیس جمهور پرسان کنم، اما مذاکرات صلح جریان داره و در ضمن آقای خلیلزاد هم در سفر دومیش به افغانستان و منطقه است. فکر میکنین که در راستای صحبت با طالبان حکومت موقت جور شود در افغانستان که طالبان در حکومت آینده افغانستان شریک شوند؟ در ضمن کمیسیون انتخابات اعلان کرد که تاریخ روز رایدهی انتخابات ریاست جمهوری را با زودی اعلان میکنن. فکر میکنن اشاره است به اموتو یک کار که شود؟ و معلومات شما چی است از سفر دوم آقای خلیلزاد به افغانستان؟
Let's take all of the questions I can answer.
We'll go ahead and take several questions, and we'll try and answer them as a group here. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that appears to be a choke on economic development in Afghanistan is the availability of electrical power to power factories. You know, for instance, the huge amount of subsistence agriculture doesn't get processed, and then you know, it's all the sort of cascading effects. So what are the changes since 2014 in the ability to generate electrical power, and are there any factories that have been created as a result?
Right here in the blue collar.
My name is Aditya Balu. I'm a student at SAIS, Johns Hopkins, second year conflict management concentrator. If you allow me to ask a political related question, it's about the nature of relationships between India and Pakistan and Afghanistan and Pakistan. What would need to happen between India and Pakistan for Pakistan to prioritize its route to Central Asia through a stable Afghanistan over the supposed sandwich between Pakistan, Afghanistan and India that they're concerned about?
Okay.
It's right here. This will be our last one, I think.
Let's get her also.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Sorab Azad. I work for Refugees International. My question is regarding the security issue in Afghanistan. The Taliban accused of President Ghani's administration as being a puppet government for the Americans. Exactly in what way can the Afghan government do to look more credible and legitimate in front and in the eyes of the Taliban?
Okay, and our last question here in red. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Elaine Srero, Associate Rector for UACU, WIUU in Kiev, Ukraine. Besides this very important and pivotal energy sector, what other sectors do you see as being very critical to the economic development for stability in Afghanistan?
All right, I'll start with the first question that was in Dari, and I'll try to address, state the question briefly. The comment was in terms of Ambassador Khalilzad's visit to Afghanistan and his role in the peace process, what kind of a role that Afghan government would have. First of all, the meeting that 2 days ago President Ghani addressed, referred to with Ambassador Khalilzad. I was in that meeting when he met with the Peace Council as well as a number of leading women in Afghanistan. And his statement was that, that the US government wants to use its influence in bringing the two sides together, but it's going to be basically the Afghans government and the Taliban's to see what kind of what environments and what kind of states and what kind of conditions they will be working on. So the U.S. is not really putting any specific issues along that line. And this was basically a quote that I was sitting about one seat next to Ambassador Khalizad when he made those comments, which brings me to the question about whether the Taliban's allegation that that Afghanistan government is a puppet government. Well, Afghanistan government has been elected by over 30 million Afghan population. If the whole 30 million people are puppets of the U.S., then maybe you're right. How could, when people have gone to actual elections and they have voted for these people, how could they be, I think it's about time that this kind of puppet statements and all of these kind of rhetorics go away. People even, 2 weeks ago when they had the parliamentary elections, how many places people will take these kind of chances where they could be blown in by a suicide bomber or other BB guns or snipers, and they'll still go and vote. That's the kind of desire that the Afghan people have for bringing us representative government, and they have shown that in both men and women. I think, it's about time that those kind of rhetorics that has been part of some people's change that one, because they cannot come up with anything but that rhetorics. The Afghan government have really stated that yes, they can become the Taliban's are welcomed as to become part of political part of the country, without any preconditions. But there has been some key elements that had been set aside. First of all, the Afghan constitution has to be respected. The Afghan constitution can be changed, but the Afghan constitution has to be accepted, and within that one, it has to be, people has to, accept that one, and within that one we can work. And it has a number of key elements, and one of those elements are human rights and women's rights, and those ones are red lines that cannot be crossed. So I think, when we talk about, we want Taliban's to come as part of a democratic society, as part of a group that can work within and live within a democratic society. So I think the Taliban and their supporters better realize that this is not 1996. The Afghan women, the Afghan population as a whole, the kind of democracy that despite all of its issues and despite all of the challenges that they have experienced, the genie is out of the bottle. You cannot put it back in the bottle. Coming in terms of the questions for Pakistan and India, India has been a traditional and long-term partner of Afghanistan, spanning over a couple of millennia and more. Culturally, commercially, in so many things, we have so many common heritage, so many common elements, and they have been a long-term partner. They will remain a long-term partner. Afghanistan interests Pakistan to serve a very similar purpose. Afghanistan has no secret deals with India. All of the relationship that we have is based on trust, based on two countries, two sovereign governments, and two people that have a long history, and they will continue to have strong cultural ties, educational ties, as well as commercial ties. Our hope is that Pakistan we have similar relationship with Pakistan, but I think it's Pakistan that has to decide what they would like to do as part of it and where they would like to end. But let me just state one statistic about Pakistan. Pakistan is the 6th largest population of the world. It has an economy smaller than Israel. So it has all of this conflict really helped Pakistan. It has not. For the betterment of the people of Pakistan, I think it's better that there will be far, not only peace, but as closer linkages and ties between Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India and Central Asia as a whole. That whole region is ripe for being a very functioning economic ecosystem. Right now, that's the least integrated region of the world economically. It's not helping anyone. So I think for that purpose, just to, I'll just give you one other statistics in terms of electricity. You talked about South Asia as a whole. Pakistan, when they finish the current projects that they have at hand in a few years, they'll have 25,000 megawatts of electricity, a country of over 200 million people. For an average economy, you need 1 megawatt for every 1,000 person, which means that for the country to have an average economy, they need over 200,000 megawatts. And the rhetorics have been that as of not the current government, the prior government was, as of 2019, they'll be able to sell electricity. In fact, for one of the agreements that we have between Central Asia and Pakistan through Afghanistan, I had to work with Pakistan to add that comment that Pakistanis can sell electricity to Central Asia, although it economically may sound crazy, but we had to do that one for them, for Pakistan. So I think this is basically where, we hope Pakistan can really see that one as a way that on how we can work together as a region, as equals, as sovereign nations, but a region that can have a future together successfully, where economically and politically the areas can work together. I think that really is the that has been the policy that Afghan government has pushed for. Coming back to the question in terms of electricity, as President Ghani referred to, if you go back to 2014, we were 9 power islands. We have worked in building a power grid. In 2 years, the 220,000 volts grid will be finished. So every one of the 34 provincial capitals will be connected to 220,000 volts. We, in about a year, will be finishing the 500 kV power ring, which will, on the eastern side. On the western side, again, the agreements that he referred to with Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, that will finish the western part. In the past 15 months, we connected in the past 15 months, we connected 9 provinces to the power grid. These were some of the poorest provinces, and ironically, they were paying the highest electricity rates. Their power rates was dropped by a factor of 5 or 6. And just to give you in terms of the timing, in the prior 50 years, we had not connected 9 provinces. So have we made enough progress? There's a lot more that are needed, but compared to where we were, the progress has, we have been making good progress. But I totally agree with you that, as I stated in my early comments, that electricity is the infrastructure of infrastructures. But again, similar to that one, in IT systems, the work that we're doing in terms of connectivity with the internet, especially with one agreement that we made with China through the wall. There's a small area that Afghanistan and China has common borders. We are in the process of doing the survey to put an internet connectivity through that area. And if we can connect through that line, the data time between Europe and Asia can drop by over 30 milliseconds. But that could be one of the shortest paths of China's internet traffic all the way to, not only to the Gulf, but to Africa, as well as the shortest route to Caucasus, and a possibility of alternate routes for Central Asian countries other than Trans-Siberia. So these are, and also with the railroad lines connecting Central Asia to warm waters, to the Gulf. These are the paths that not only build connectivity but the region, but also brings countries of the region together. And that basically has been the policy of the Afghan government, and we've made a lot of progress in the past few years in putting a lot of the soft elements together. And our hope is that in the next 5 years, a lot of those soft elements can change and transform into putting the actual hard infrastructures, such as some of these railroad lines, such as some of these major power lines from Central Asia to South Asia, as well as East-West. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Minister Karimi for some insightful remarks. Thank you, sir. And that completes our event for this morning. Thanks for attending, and please remember our veterans on our Veterans Day holiday today. Thank you.